Hello everybody and welcome to the Bleak Broadcast. This is my brand new paranormal podcast and it's going to be coming out every single week. In the podcast, I talk about alleged real life hauntings. People might want to email me, and you can. That email address is itsbrotherbleak@gmail.com. Feel free to get in touch with your own encounters, and we will talk about them here on the show. Now, if you are familiar with me, my YouTube channel, Brother Bleak, you might be thinking, well, this isn't the kind of stuff that he usually does. Usually it's kind of folklore or the occasional story about hauntings, curiosities, anything kind of to do with that realm. And that, that content's still coming out, and it's going to be coming out alongside the podcast, so don't worry about that. If the podcast isn't your thing, still stick around. My regular content will be coming out. I have a video coming out in a couple of days about some very interesting stuff. I won't even say what it is on here, but it's very bizarre, very eerie, and it's a mystery that has been kind of coursing through the minds of people and has been at the center of a lot of conversation for hundreds of years. So we kind of look into some sort of ancient mysteries this week, so that's going to be really cool. But if you are here for ghost stories, then look no further, because this is where to find them. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the Bleak Broadcast. So this first story is called The Haunting Old Man, and I found this on Reddit just a couple of months ago. I'm going to share it with you now, so let's get into this. I've been wanting to share this story for a long time. It might sound hard to believe and maybe even a little far-fetched, but experiencing it firsthand was terrifying. And for some context, I grew up in a terraced house, a small 2-story home attached to our neighbours, and upstairs there were 2 bedrooms, downstairs was the living room, kitchen, bathroom and a laundry room. We didn't have many windows, but they were all placed at about eye level with the outside, so anyone walking by could easily see inside. And the house had its quirks, but I never realised until later just how much darkness it held within its walls. I was very young when it all started, probably around 3 or 4 years old. And one day I was outside playing, and my mum heard me laughing and talking just as if I was chatting with someone. And at first she didn't think much of it, figuring I'd just made a new friend. But as she came outside to check on me, she saw I was alone. Or so she thought. And when she asked me who I was talking to, I casually told her, the old man. I told her that he wanted to come inside and play with me and my toys, and assuming he was just my imaginary friend, she said it was fine. She never realised that in that moment, she might have invited something sinister into our home. Now looking back, I realised that this old man, well, he wasn't just some harmless figment of my imagination. He was something much darker, and at first he seemed to linger around the edges of my world. But as I got older, he made himself known in ways that were unmistakable. Doors would knock on their own, objects would shift or tumble, and strange sounds echoed through the house, especially on the stairs. And I was so afraid of the stairs that I wouldn't walk down them normally. I could only walk backwards, just too scared he might push me. As I got older, I could feel his presence watching and lurking as if waiting. When I was around 12, it got so intense that my family and I ended up sleeping downstairs in the living room for 2 or 3 years. The old man had claimed the bedrooms upstairs, and I couldn't bring myself to go up there alone. Sleep paralysis became a regular horror for me, trapping me as he would appear at my bedside. I can still see his face in my memory. It was dark, almost black eyes, and he looked to be around 60 or 70. His voice was low and raspy, and whenever he spoke, it was in short, fragmented sentences. I couldn't remember much of what he said, but I always felt like he wanted to tell me something. What though? I would never know. One night, while we were sleeping downstairs, I had an out-of-body experience that I'll never forget. I felt like I was floating and just watching myself. My mom and my dad sleeping, and I looked over and I saw a dark shadow standing by the kitchen door. It was staring at my mother, and I could sense she was trapped in a sleep paralysis episode. But this wasn't the old man. This figure was cloaked and taller, with chains in its hands, and they began swinging like a lasso. The chains wrapped around my mother's feet, and it tugged her off the couch. She couldn't scream. She just laid there helpless. And it wasn't until her body hit the floor that she broke free, letting out a scream that woke my dad and me. And my mum couldn't walk for a week afterwards. We were all so shaken. We called a priest to bless the house. When we finally moved out, we had to empty the attic, and while we were up there gathering boxes, we stumbled across an old photograph, one that made our blood run cold. It was him, the old man I'd seen for all of those years. We immediately found a family Bible and said a prayer, and then burned the photograph. Feeling a strange sense of peace as we watched the flames consume his image. And it was only years later that I learned who he was. The grandfather of a friend of mine, who had once lived in that very house. I still visit his grave when I'm back in town. I don't know why. Maybe he was trying to tell me something all along, but whatever it was, he never got the chance. Thank you for reading my story. I'm curious to see if anyone else has had similar experiences. That one actually freaked me out quite a bit reading that. I enjoyed reading it. But that was definitely written by somebody who had lived that experience, or at least, at the very least, believed that they had lived that experience. You get a lot of skeptics with this sort of stuff. And just because I'm somebody who enjoys the paranormal, I don't necessarily believe everything I hear. I'm not one of these people who you hear something and immediately think ghost. I'm always trying to find logic and connection to things, what could it be? Because 9 times out of 10, there are explanations to things, but the thing that fascinates me more than anything is that 1 out of 10 where it can't be explained, where reason and logic just go out of the window, and we find ourselves in these situations that can change us entirely. The idea that an entire family uprooted their lives and lived only in the lower floor of the house, that goes beyond something just going bump in the night. The link between their friend's grandfather as well, I'm sure there's more to that. But anyway, let's move on to the next one. This next story was emailed into me. Now, if you're listening to this and you have experienced anything yourself, I would honestly love to hear it. So please go ahead and email me. That address is itsbrotherbleak@gmail.com. Years ago, when my kids were teens, they had a friend who was into Wicca. And this friend, he claimed that he knew how to cast spells. And he shared with my kids that his father suffered from sleep paralysis every single night. At the time, I didn't really know much about what they got up to, but looking back, I really wish I'd known what they were inviting in. You see, one night this friend came over, and my kids decided to play Bloody Mary. And after that night, they started hearing knocking sounds. Soft taps on the walls, noises from inside the closets, and sometimes even coming from inside the walls themselves. It happened when they were falling asleep or just waking up, but it only grew from there. And then they did something that they called making a quote-unquote demon portal. Now, I don't know if a friend showed them how to do it or if they found it online, but they left a piece of paper with a bloody handprint on it inside one of the closets. The same room where the knocking had started. And I only heard about this later. But a few days after they made this paper, my middle son was downstairs just playing the piano alone. And he was right in the middle of a song when a torn scrap of paper just fluttered down onto the keys right in front of him. And he stopped, he picked it up and wondered where it had come from. So later he checked his closet and he found that the paper they'd left there was missing a corner. And that corner matched exactly to the scrap that had landed on his piano. He ripped the page out of the closet and crumpled it up and he threw it in the trash outside. And when I was taking out the trash later, I noticed this crumpled paper and was instantly creeped out by it. So that's when I asked my son and he told me what had happened. And I put my foot down. No more portals, no more games like that. I thought that'd just be the end of it. But it wasn't. I worked from home while my kids were at school, so soon after I started hearing loud noises from the kitchen and from the office while I was trying to work. Slamming cabinets, chairs shifting on their own. I'd go and check and find nothing. Except once, it was my cat hiding under the stairs and I thought maybe it's just the cat. But then something else happened. So it was one day my sister drove by the house while we were all out and she saw the lights in my home office turning just on and off. But she knew we weren't home, so she got the key from my mum to go and check it out. But the house was completely empty. Strange noises only continued, and sometimes I'd hear the kitchen chairs being dragged across the tile floor. My kids were away on weekends with their dad, and I was there alone, so I just began locking my bedroom door at night. But one night while they were gone, the sounds got worse, and it was as if all the chairs in the house would just be dragged across the wooden floors, louder and closer than before, so I refused to open my bedroom door, certain that if I did, I'd find something straight out of a horror movie just waiting for me. And I barely slept, just up all night waiting for daylight. And in the morning when I finally dared to open my door, I saw one kitchen chair sitting at the bottom of the stairs. It's facing up towards me. My kitchen was 2 rooms away from the staircase. My blood ran cold as I stared at it. And after all the noise I'd heard, I'd expect chaos, but just that one chair was eerie enough. I didn't even touch it. I just went straight to church that morning to ask for a blessing on the house. And after that, the chair stopped moving, where my kids still occasionally reported hearing knocking in their walls. And eventually they grew up and moved out. I sold the house, but the new owners told me later that it was haunted, and they ended up selling it too. The owners after that only lasted a few years before putting it back on the market. Now I live in a new place, but sometimes I still hear soft knocks behind my headboard, just like in my old house, and oddly, my kids and I all feel drawn back to that house. Like some part of it is just calling to us. Ooh, that one, that's creepy. That's a really good one. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you for emailing that in. That is, yeah. That being drawn back to a place where you experience some kind of paranormal activity, that is quite common, I believe. There's a lot of different reasons. People are often drawn to these places for like a mix of psychological, emotional, even social reasons. First of all, there's the thrill and the adrenaline of it. Although you've had this horrifying experience, as somebody who I believe I have encountered something, not a lot, but I had an experience that made me a believer in all of this stuff. It's why I started a YouTube channel on this stuff. Before this, I just believed in, there absolutely no way ghosts are real. I was like, there's no chance. And even now, I still approach everything with an open mind. But I have experienced something truly terrifying, and thrill and adrenaline is the big one for me. Because haunted places, they invoke fear, they invoke excitement, it kind of triggers this rush of adrenaline, and for some, this heightened state's really enjoyable. That's why you get people who go out ghost hunting and stuff like that. Or, they have a thrill when they sort of watch a horror movie. Some people hate horror movies, some people adore them, and it's because of that smaller contained thrill. But there's also the curiosity of the unknown. Humans, we're just naturally curious, and I think the mystery surrounding haunted locations can be almost irresistible. People, they want to see if the stories are true, or if they're experiencing something unexplained themselves. They kind of want to you want to feel that. There's also the big one, and it sounds like this could be the big one for you. When you've emailed, we've gone through that story from based on that story. It could be that you're seeking validation. Some people visit haunted sites hoping to experience the paranormal activity firsthand because they might be looking for personal proof. And for you, maybe it's that this actually happened because you've got this residual knocking that's going on even now with yourself and with your kids. And I think maybe you're just wanting to some reassurance that you weren't going crazy, that this all happened. Or as well, it could just be that this is a place where your family were together and your children were young, and it could just be because it was your home for so long, so you have associated it with some really great times as well. So there's a lot going on there. But thank you again for sending that in. That one is fantastic. I'm going to just go on to our third and final story this evening. And I'm going to look at which one here. I've got a few that, again, have either been emailed or I found online. This is one I found online. This one's called The Gardener. I grew up in a big old house in rural Scotland during the 1980s. And there's this one thing that I've never forgotten that happened there. You see, our house was up a long and steep footpath. Too steep for a car, so we would walk from the gate at the bottom of our house each day. And back then we had a milk delivery. It was either around 5 or 6 a.m. And the milkman would usually leave the bottles at our doorstep, but one day he just stopped doing that and started leaving them all the way down at the gate instead. So when my mum asked him why, he said his helper was afraid of the gardener. And this was really odd because we didn't have a gardener. Mum didn't press him further. She just sort of figured, the helper was just, wanting to save time, was just making some kind of excuse. But a few months later, my brothers had a friend over to play. And this friend, he told my mum, he said, Sandy's grandpa's in the front garden and he's just standing there with his fork and he's not saying anything. My mum was so puzzled. So she went outside to have a look and she didn't see anyone. But when she asked the friend what the man looked like, he described an older man with a white beard, wearing a tweed bonnet, old worn clothes and trousers held up by string. So my mum thought maybe he had seen a local character known to everyone as Billy. He was a man with mental health issues who would sometimes wander around, so it made sense. But the friend just sort of shook his head and he said, no, Billy doesn't have a beard. My mum just shrugged it off, thinking it was someone else or the kid was just, imagining things like kids do. Around 6 months later, she was getting kind of frustrated with the milk being left down by the gate. We all were. I had to go down and get it at 5, 6 in the morning. Mum switched to a completely new dairy and they would deliver from a town that was about 10 miles away. And for a few weeks, everything went smoothly. But then one morning, we found a smashed milk bottle on the doorstep. And after that, the bottles just stopped coming up to the house altogether. So Mum called the dairy to find out what was going on, and they promised to ask the delivery lad about it, but when they got back to her, they told her that he was spooked by an old man in the garden. Apparently he had startled him so badly that he had dropped the bottle, and this time Mum asked for a description. Once again, it was an older man with a white beard, a tweed cap and worn old clothes. Now it's funny now, but at the time it left us all with chills. The milkman's helper, my brother's friend, they had no way of knowing each other, and they both gave the same description of a man that none of us had ever seen around the village. And my dad, who was a local doctor and a total skeptic, even he would set up little traps with fishing lines and tent pegs in the garden to see if anything was moving through there, in the night. But even after all these years, I still can't explain it. Well, that'll do us for today, guys. Thank you so much for listening. And if you are watching this, or rather listening to this through YouTube, why don't you leave me a comment below and let me know, what do you think about this last story, The Gardener? Was this a apparition, or was this actually some local mentally ill chap out for a morning stroll who was just letting his facial hair grow a bit wild? I don't know. I have been Brother Bleak. This has been the Bleak Broadcast. And thank you so much for listening. Go ahead and follow along. New episodes out every single week. Until next time, see ya.